Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 1987's Castlevania, the horror action platformer about whipping your way to Count Dracula that launched one of Konami's biggest gaming franchises.
Following that is the character action of the Devil May Cry series, applied to the conflict between the Umbra Witches and the Lumen Sages, 2009's Bayonetta.
Easy theme this week.
Yes, Monster Slayers. It just worked out perfectly so. Joe, I am sorry to hear that you're a bit under the weather this week.
I am indeed, so if I don't seem as high energy as usual, that's why. Also, you mentioned in last week's episode that it had been your birthday last week, but we had recorded that episode before then, obviously. Happy birthday for real.
Thank you. Happy birthday.
It has actually happened now.
I feel older.
Well, luckily, the passage of time continues to march on. The one constant in the world.
As long as you have the two eyes of the world, I guess, according to Bayonetta lore. I don't know. Let's talk about some composer follow-up headlines to start out the show real quick. We have several here. First, a game that is especially close to your heart.
Yeah. Florence finally came out on Switch and PC, and before anybody asks, yes, I knew this was going to happen when we recorded the Florence episode, and I couldn't talk about it, which was painful. But it has finally come out, Switch and PC. It's an extra $3 compared to the mobile game, but that just means it's $6 now. It's still dirt cheap. Definitely, absolutely go play it. And then go check out our episode that features Kevin Pankin's fantastic score for the game.
Also, check out your review on Nintendo World Report. That was a really nice one. Good job there.
Thank you.
The Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences had their DICE Awards recently. If you're wondering, as far as what won Outstanding Achievement in Original Music Composition, that would be Control from Petri Alanko and Martin Stig Andersen. Control, a game I definitely need to get to. It won several awards throughout the night. It beat out Arise, A Simple Story from David Garcia, Erica from Austin Wintory, Golem from Martin O'Donnell, and Mortal Kombat 11 from Will Roget. This award show is particularly notable, though, because Untitled Goose Game took home Game of the Year.
It has been amazing to see the dev team respond to it, because they weren't there. They weren't able to make it to the awards show. And so they all found out over Twitter that Goose Game won. And they were all like, what? What?
So congrats to House over there in Australia.
Much deserved. Also, the Gang Awards nominations are out. The nominees for Music of the Year are Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order from Stephen Barton and Gordy Hobb, Erica from Austin Wintory, Fantastic Creatures from Ian Chen, Undersea from Magic Leap Studios, Borderlands 3 from Jesper Kid, Michael McCann, and Finishing Move Inc., and Rend from Neil Acree.
So we'll see what happens there. And then I think the BAFTAs, if you're wondering, I think that's April 2nd. So a little bit of a way until some of these bigger award shows start rolling out. Now, Eric Barone, may know that name as Concerned Ape. He's the sole creator of Stardew Valley. He announced that he is working on 2 more game projects. And then the internet freaked out. And so then he asked everyone to please calm down.
Yeah, he basically was like, guys, please don't speculate and get super hype about these games. Look, I'm just making them. I'm not trying to make the next big internet thing. He's basically doing what he did for Stardew, which was, I'm going to make a game that I want to play, and oh geez, it's the biggest thing ever. And he seems well aware that that might not happen this time, and that's fine. But also, Eric, do you ever sleep? Take a nap.
Yeah, it's just one of those things in the internet culture where it's like, this happened. Oh, no, wait, like, let's pull it back. Please don't look too much into it.
Well, it reminds me of, you remember around New Year's Eve when Nintendo posted that picture of Pearl and Callie and Marie from Splatoon hanging out in the middle of a city, celebrating New Year's Eve, and everybody started screaming like, did Nintendo where's Marina? Did Nintendo just tease Splatoon 3? And it was like 10 minutes later they posted another picture that was just, where's Marina? She's taking the picture. And it's people freak out way too easily and look way too far into things.
Well, it's also like the Mario Odyssey Mario in his tropical gear with, some watermelon, and it's like,
oh yeah,
Sunshine DLC, and it's like, Jesus, all right, slow down.
Let's chill for a second, guys. Sometimes people post things and it's just for fun, or in Eric Barone's case, he didn't announce anything about the games. He just said he's working on 2 more games. Those games might not even come out.
Yeah, no, it's still very early to tell. And then we'll wrap things up, kind of just an overall thing. You put out a really neat feature on Nintendo World Report.
I did. I put out the first part of Who's That Smash Arranger, which is a video series that is basically just a mini sort of, when we talk about the composers specifically on this show, I basically took that and I shortened it, and I'm putting it into video form, sort of. And the first part is out. It goes from A to F based on last names. So this one goes from Soshi Abe to Yasufumi Fukuda. And it was a lot of fun to put together. A huge pain to edit. And I'm looking forward to putting out more, but not looking forward to editing more. So we'll see how that goes.
But definitely check that out on Nintendo World Report.
And with that, it's time to jump right into it. Let's whip our way, at the risk of causing whiplash, into Castlevania. So, we've talked about a game in the Castlevania series before. Back in episode 21, Peter covered Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which is considered a massive turning point in that series. One of the most important games of that entire series is the game that basically caused a genre to be half named after the series. But this one is the one that started the whole thing. So, Castlevania was originally released on the Famicom Disk System in Japan on September 26th, 1986, under the name Akumajo Dracula, which roughly translated to Dracula Satanic Castle. Upon its immediate success in Japan, they fast-tracked a cartridge version for the NES, which was released in North America on May 1st, 1987, under the new title Castlevania, with PAL regions not seeing a release until December of 1988. So a year and a half. It took them a year and a half to get Castlevania. The game would actually not be re-released in Japan on the regular Famicom until February of 1993.
Oh.
So, the SNES was well out by that time. And also a fun fact, the May release in North America was meant to coincide with the 90th anniversary of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which originally released in May of 1897.
Oh, wow.
And also a version of Castlevania was made for the MSX2, a sort of gaming PC. Think of it in the same places like the Commodore 64, stuff like that. It was released only in Japan in October of 1986 under the same Akumajo Dracula name, but this version actually came out in Europe very quickly after, before Castlevania, under the title Vampire Killer. So while the graphics, music, and story of this version are completely identical from the Famicom game, the level design is completely different. And same with the level, flow. Instead of being linear platforming levels, it's a maze game where you have to go find a key to open a door to get to the next level. Really weird. So technically, this is the first Castlevania game that ever came out in the West. Ever. The story of Castlevania is simple. Dracula's castle has appeared, and his minions are terrorizing the nearby villages. As the player, you take control of Simon Belmont, a vampire hunter from a long lineage of vampire hunters in the Belmont clan. You must make your way through Dracula's castle in order to defeat the evil vampire, even if it's just temporarily. And for the most part, Castlevania is your general side-scrolling platformer, with one major change from how a lot of platformers did things back in that day. In most platformers, to kill an enemy, you would, jump on them. But in Castlevania, you have a whip that can be used to take out enemies from a short distance away. And this complicates a few things. First of all, the hitbox on the whip, I believe, is only at the tip of it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, there's a wind-up. So when you hit the button, it's not like an immediate hit. He has to pull his arm back and whip the whip forward. So you have to be aware of and be ready for that. But also, when you first start, or when you die, the whip is like this tiny little, it's basically a piece of cloth, it might as well be. But you can whip light candles and stuff and get whip upgrades. And after you get 2, then you have the full whip, which is the ball and chain and really long. And I personally have qualms with this mechanic. I think it's pointless, but we'll get into that some other time. And also, the jump in Castlevania is super weird because you cannot control your momentum in midair at all. When you jump, you are basically just stuck to that sort of arc that you are on now. The only momentum that you get is what you had when you hit the jump button. And that's it. The player can also collect sub-weapons. Only one can be equipped at a time. So if you get one and then you collect another, the one you just collected will replace the one you previously had until you collect another one, which will replace the one you previously had, etc., etc. These include a dagger that can be thrown in a straight line, an axe that can be thrown in an arc, a boomerang cross that boomerangs. I don't know how to describe that. It comes back. A bottle of holy water that can create holy flames on the floor in front of you, and a clock that can freeze all enemies on the screen. And using these sub-weapons is not free. It costs hearts, which, cruelly, one of 2 games that I can think of where this is the case, when you pick up hearts in this game, they're not health. They are currency, basically. Using a sub-weapon costs hearts, and pretty much every enemy and some of the candles in the castle will drop them, which in turn lets you use your sub-weapons more. If you are looking for a heal in Castlevania, the only place you can get it is by whipping walls and finding fully cooked chickens in them.
As you do,
As you do, just, break open a wall and eat the chicken inside. It's the only method of healing in any level, ever. Each level ends with a boss, as is usually the case. Each one a famous monster, such as Frankenstein's monster, the mummy, Medusa, a giant vampire bat, and even the Grim Reaper himself. Once you've defeated a boss, your health is replenished, and you move on to the next level, with the final boss being Dracula himself. So, with all that, now is the time that I ask, what are our experiences with Castlevania? Have you played it?
I have not played it, but very familiar with what the game is like, the challenges of committing to your actions in a game where the enemy patterns, whether it's, parabolas of Medusa head movements or just enemies on the ground, you're right. When you're talking about the game mechanics, there is a lot of committing to your actions and being very deliberate with what you're doing. So very familiar with that. Familiar with the lineage of Castlevania games, but never played this one. Never really felt the need or want to.
I played it for Smasterpieces, and I think it's well established how I feel about the NES at this point. So I won't go into detail on that, but I fully admit that it is a classic, but that does not mean that I had fun playing it.
Mm-hmm.
I explicitly did not. I think it has a lot of problems. I think it is very, very dated. For instance, I mentioned the whip upgrade mechanic. I think it's completely pointless because most of the time after you die, you're left with the dinky whip, and then within like 4 or 5 whips, you already have both whip upgrades. Just keep the whip the same the whole time, etc., stuff like that. The bosses suck, all of them. There's not one good boss in the entirety of Castlevania 1, except maybe Death. I think Death is a cool boss. He's just super hard.
And you can't whip up, right? You can only whip forward.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean...
Whipping in any direction was something that would not be introduced into the series until Super Castlevania 4.
Yeah, and I wasn't even expecting like whipping down or whipping diagonally, but at the very least, you could have been like whip up or whip, to this in front of you.
Yeah, I'll get into that further down, but they actually did plan on that being the case, and it just didn't happen. So speaking of, that's a great segue into how was this game made? So first of all, one of my favorite things I learned while researching this game is that Simon Belmont's name was not always Simon Belmont. And in fact, his original name was Peter Dante.
I like that name a lot.
I like that name a lot too, but that would have been a really weird... Can you imagine? Super Smash Bros. Ultimate comes out in 2018. Peter Dante is a playable character, and you win the match with him, and you hear the announcer yell, "Peter wins!"
This game's winner is Peter.
And now I'm just picturing you sitting in a room like, yeah, it is.
I'm the winner.
Even if you didn't win the match, as long as you were playing as somebody that was playing that character, you still won. The announcer said it. Xander Mobus' law. I can't find why they changed this name. Just that this was his name at first. There were also some sub-weapons that were originally planned in the game that were cut before the final release, including garlic, a wooden stake, and an item that would have transformed Simon into a werewolf.
I almost wonder if some of those would have been like extra effective on certain bosses or something like that. Just a thought.
Maybe.
Like if you carried those with you to the end of a level, like it would help you. I don't know.
Possibly. Garlic or the wooden stake I could see being like super effective against Dracula. And boy, having an item super effective against Dracula would make that fight suck less. Other changes during development include the fact that Simon's whip was, like I said, originally planned to go in every direction. And they ended up not being able to do that. So that would, like I said, happen in Super Castlevania 4 for the SNES. But when so I found an interview on Shmuplations. Shout out to Shmuplations. Fantastic website that just takes like old Japanese articles and interviews and stuff and translates them. I found an interview with director Hitoshi Akamatsu. And at one point he was asked, why do the Belmonts fight with whips? And he responded, quote, "It matched the world of the game I wanted to create, and as far as weapons go, whips are great at repelling enemies. Also, because I love Raiders of the Lost Ark."
I mean, yeah, that's a good reason.
So, yeah. Indiana Jones is why Simon Belmont has a whip. It's canon now. In fact, according to Akamatsu, a lot of the team behind Castlevania were really big fans of Western films, and it really, really shows. Frankenstein is blatantly based on Boris Karloff's portrayal of Frankenstein's monster. Dracula is heavily based on Bela Lugosi's version of the character, which obviously would change in later games as Dracula would get a more unique design that he now has with the like sort of medium length black hair and the goatee and all that. Dracula in Castlevania definitely does not look like he looked in the first game anymore at all. When asked about the fight with Death, largely considered to be the hardest boss in the game because it is, Death is the skill wall. Death is what ends many runs in Castlevania as far as I'm aware. Akamatsu stated, "I can't defeat him with the whip alone, and I don't know anybody that can. Everybody I know that fights Death does so with, like, sub-weapons, usually with the holy water, like, cheesing him out. The idea of the fight was apparently to get players to learn how to effectively use the cross and axe weapons. And I don't buy that. But I didn't make the game, so what do I know? According to Akamatsu, test players were able to beat him with just the whip. And I don't believe him. Because no, they weren't.
If he wasn't able to, then surely test players weren't. Come on.
Like, that's not real. I don't believe him. In terms of difficulty, Akamatsu claims that his only standard was that he should be able to clear it himself, and this was his way of trying to make sure the game could be beaten by anybody. Side note, real quick, that is a really bad way to do difficulty balancing. During development, you are always going to be the best at your game.
Don't do that.
Like, it's not, and I get, like, back then, that was probably his only option. Because, like, games back then were made with very small teams in a very short amount of time. So, I'm not going to blame him for that. But, yeah, if you're making a video game and you're trying to figure out, like, difficulty balance, don't base it only on what you can and can't do. Speaking of bosses, though, Dracula is a boss with 2 phases. His regular phase is just him. You're supposed to, like, jump around and whip his head to do damage. It's what the fight in Smash is based on. And then his second form is a large gargoyle-like creature. And according to Akamatsu, that's not actually supposed to be Dracula. So when you hit the last hit on his head flies off. And then his body, like, scatters through, like, explodes and scatters throughout the room. And apparently that is supposed to represent the fact that Dracula will return one day. And the giant gargoyle monster is supposed to be the curse of man that continues to resurrect Dracula in the first place. So there's some fun little lore stuff there. Last funny thing I learned from this Schmoplations article is that once you beat Dracula, the game awards you with a whole 1 point. And this is apparently a glitch, because Akamatsu didn't really fully understand how the Famicom CPU operated. So he set it to the wrong value. It's supposed to give you 10,000 points.
That would make more sense.
It would make a lot more sense. So that's really funny. Overall, Castlevania is generally considered among the most influential games of its era, and is often considered among the best games on the Famicom and NES. At time of release, Famitsu gave it a 34 out of 40. The game has been re-released several times on almost every console imaginable, especially today, from the Commodore 64 to mobile phones, to the GBA, to the Wii and Wii U Virtual Consoles. It was bundled with the NES Classic when it came out. And of course, most recently, it was released as part of the Castlevania Anniversary Collection, currently available on all major platforms. 2 more games would release on the NES, being Castlevania II Simon's Quest and Castlevania III Dracula's Curse. Neither of these games are talked about nearly as often. In fact, Simon's Quest is overall not popular among Castlevania fans. It is considered one of the poorest sequels of its era. From there, Castlevania has basically become one of the highest selling game franchises of all time. Wikipedia lists there as being 41 games in the franchise, ranging from the 2D platformers like the older titles, Metroidvanias like most titles after Symphony of the Night, attempts at 3D entries like the 64 entries and the very divisive Lords of Shadow games. And of course, it's Konami, so pachinko machines as well. Just gotta mention those pachinko machines. That's 2 weeks in a row.
Jeez, yeah.
The franchise has also expanded to include comics, radio dramas, novels. Simon appeared in Captain N, the Game Master, back in the day. And of course, most recently, there is the Netflix animated series that is very, very good. And I believe a teaser for season 3 was very recently revealed. It's coming out next month.
Yeah.
So I'm very much looking forward to that. That show is extremely good. And there's apparently also a film in the works. I didn't know this. Apparently, Paul W.S. Anderson signed on to do the project, but it's been in development hell since like 2006.
Oh, jeez.
So that movie's not happening, but they claim it is. So, and of course, most importantly, most recently, Simon would go on to appear as a playable character in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. All right, that's enough talking about the game. Let's get into the composer, because that's why we're really here. And the composer that we're going to talk about for this game is Kinuyo Yamashita. So, Yamashita was born on December 31st. I could not find the year. In Amagasaki, Hyogo, Japan. She began playing the piano at age 4. And from there, when she entered college, she attended the Osaka Electrocommunication University, where she graduated with a 2-year degree in electronic engineering in 1986, and she went straight from there into working at Konami. Castlevania was actually her very first professional composing work, ever. And its success would lead her to composing for various other titles for Konami, as well as lead to her joining the in-house band at Konami, called the Konami Kukeha Club. And she left Konami in 1989 to go freelancing. During this time, she worked with various game studios, including Natsume, for whom she became one of their go-tos when it came to doing music for licensed titles. Between 1991 and 1995, she was a member of a duo ensemble called Honey Honey, which performed live covers of American pop and jazz music. And in this duo, she was the piano player, she did the alto sax, and she also provided background vocals. She's also apparently known for composing various J-pop songs for Japanese artists, as well as various R&B songs for American artists, though try as I might, I could not find any examples of what songs she might have worked on. And between the years of 2009 and 2011, she collaborated with Video Games Live quite a few times, making guest appearances during the performance of Castlevania soundtrack music. But as far as I can tell, she appears to be retired. She moved to the US, New Jersey specifically, in 2010 to be with her husband. And her last credited game was a Wii title called Walk It Out that same year, and her personal website has not been updated since 2012. So I'm going to assume that she is retired.
That's probably a good assumption.
In terms of discography, Castlevania is the only game in the Castlevania series that she worked on. She did the music for the MSX versions of Paradiso and Snatcher. She did the music for Pocky and Rocky 2. And then, once going freelance, she did the music for Mega Man The Wily Wars and Mega Man X3. The Game Boy Color version of Croc 2, which comes back to haunt me. But licensed titles seemed to have been like her big thing. That's where she spent most of her career. Which, hey, nothing wrong with that. And the ones I recognized included Mighty Morphin Power Rangers for the SNES, Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue for the Game Boy Color, and Power Rangers Dino Thunder for the Game Boy Advance. Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the Game Boy Advance, which I find incredibly funny that she did the music for that game.
Right.
Monsters Inc. for the Game Boy Advance, and WWF WrestleMania 2000 and WWF Road to WrestleMania for the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance, respectively. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that probably most of those games probably suck, but it's kind of cool that she did the music for them. I imagine they probably have pretty good music in that case. Mm-hmm. As for historical development research on Castlevania, I don't have a lot. Castlevania's soundtrack was actually done by two people, both of them women, the other one being Satoe Terashima. As the style of the time was to credit everybody through pseudonyms or initials in order to avoid other studios poaching talent, both Yamashita and Terashima share a credit under the name James Banana, a play on the name James Bernard, who composed the score of 1958's Dracula. I actually found an interview with Yamashita where they ask, like, why did you pick James Banana? She's like, I didn't. Konami picked that. She didn't have any say on that name.
James Banana.
It kind of sucks that they both had to share a credit name, though.
True.
That's unfortunate. Yeah. One of these days, we should probably talk about Satoe Terashima, but I don't know if she did anything else in the games industry, as far as I can tell. But you're probably wondering what this game sounds like. Or probably not, because it's Castlevania, and it's an NES game, and you probably already have an idea. But let's talk about it anyways, with our 5 critical tracks. First one being Vampire Killer. Composed by Satoe Terashima, this is the one. This is the Castlevania song. It is by far the most iconic song to come out of the game. It's basically become Simon Belmont's personal theme. And the only song in the entire series that I think rivals this one is Bloody Tears from Castlevania 2. Even so, this song is extremely catchy. It's a great first stage song. And it's no wonder that it sort of became iconic from here, to be honest.
Yeah, it's the first song. It's absolutely more iconic. I do personally like Bloody Tears more. In case anyone's wondering, that's da 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 da. Such a good song. I think that's a better song when I go and listen to more. But yeah, this is clearly the more iconic one. I mean, da 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 da. Like it's representative of Simon, at least until Castlevania 4, for a reason.
This is the song that they used in the Smash trailer to introduce him.
Yeah.
So, it's a big one. I also like Bloody Tears better, and in October, we might just have a chance to talk about Bloody Tears proper. But you'll have to wait until then. Critical track number 2 is another one of the more iconic songs from the game, being Stalker. Also composed by Satoe Terashima. This is another contender for the most iconic song in the game. I don't like this song very much. I understand why, because it really does feel very vampire-y, if that makes sense. The dun 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 dun. That is a melody that I think of when I think of Castlevania. But also, compared to some of the other music in this game, I think this is one of the weaker songs, personally. I mean, not so weak that it's not on the critical 5, but
it just doesn't have the rhythmic intensity.
Yeah, pretty much.
But, it does have, the memorable lines, especially the bass line of bum, 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 bum. It's definitely a good earworm in that sense. But yeah, so you'll make the point here that because it's an NES game, there are only so many songs to choose from. So this did have to be here, but you're right. It's not among the better songs in the game.
Yeah, it's all right. That's about the best I have. But you know what song I can't say it's all right about? It's critical track number 3, Wicked Child. This one was composed by Kinuyo Yamashita. Oh, this song rules! It's so good! I think this is one of the best 8-bit songs. Like, that's some stiff competition, I know, because you got like stuff like Mega Man and like some Mario games and all sorts of stuff. I think this is among the best 8-bit compositions ever made.
Wow. High praise.
I love this song. It is so good. It's my favorite song in the game by far. Oh, it's so good.
It's interesting you mentioned Mega Man, though, because the part where it's the da-da-da, da-da-da,
it's very Mega Man.
Yeah, it's like super Mega Man. Oh my gosh.
But also, that's my favorite part of the song.
Yes,
it's so good. I was like looking at piano renditions of this song today because I love piano renditions of 8-bit songs. They always sound so good. Most of the time. And just, this song's super good. It's really high intensity. It's incredibly hype. It's incredibly catchy. Just, best song of the game by far, 100% in my opinion. But, sadly, like all things, we have to move to critical track number 4. I don't know why I said sadly, because this song's still really good. It's Heart of Fire. This one is also composed by Kinuyo Yamashita. And, boy, this song has got a tense vibe to it. It's got those deep bass notes. And, those arpeggios. Are those arpeggios? Are those called arpeggios? The Bloody Tears style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to say, because at least for this time, with, limited tracks on the NES, it just sounds like it's two notes articulating back and forth while a comparative bass line is moving. But so it's not the full up and down of an arpeggio. But
I don't know how else to describe it.
I don't know either. That's where our music theory knowledge is lacking. If you know, hit us up on Twitter at Soundchat OST.
I would genuinely like to know, yes. But like, I can see a very easy straight line from point A to point B from here to Bloody Tears. Just because of that part alone.
Yeah, sure. They're probably like, this sounds really cool. Let's do it again.
Yeah, very much so. I would not be surprised if whoever wrote Bloody Tears, which I actually don't know off the top of my head who originally wrote Bloody Tears. I don't know who scored Castlevania 2. I would bet you money if you asked them one of the inspirations for Bloody Tears, they would probably point to this song. But who knows? But yeah, this song is great. I love it. And then, of course, it's time for critical track number 5. Out of Time. This one was composed by Satoe Terashima, and this is it. This is the music for the final level of Castlevania. It's time to make the final climb up to Dracula, while this amazingly tense and hype song accompanies your way up. It moves very quickly, kind of sounds like a clock ticking a little bit, as if to tell you like, no, this isn't just for show. You are out of time. Dracula is waiting. Let's do this. Just with the constantly moving the dun 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 dun. The Smash remix of this song is super good, by the way.
So it's incredible. And even going back and listening to this original, like, this is my favorite on the Castlevania soundtrack.
This is definitely a close second for me.
Yeah, it's really just has that exciting energy. Even to bring the loop back again with the ba-da-da-da-da-da, like it's exciting.
Mm-hmm. And it's perfect for the final level and for the clock tower. Like I said, it sounds like a clock is ticking. Apparently all the gears in the clock tower are supposed to represent Dracula's heart. And that's why when you defeat Dracula, only the clock tower collapses and not the whole castle. That's what the director said, so I believe him. But yeah, this song rules. I absolutely love this game's soundtrack. But being an NES game, it's not a very long soundtrack. And so I don't have anything on the cutting room floor.
I think this may be one of the first episodes where that's happened.
I think so too. I know there are a couple other songs like Poison Mind, the boss fight theme, except guess what? Hey, that song sucks. That song sucks a lot. It's not good. Even in Rondo of Blood, when they bring it back and make it sound a little bit cooler, it still kind of sucks because it's like a 10-second loop. It's so annoying. So yeah, I think this covers, like, Castlevania has a fantastic soundtrack, and I think this basically covers all that needs to be covered, personally. So what? Well, I never forget about the game. Again, like, I admit, it's a classic. I understand. I don't like it very much. I didn't enjoy playing with it. But, like, I'm very interested in trying more of the Castlevania series. I have, at this point, only played 2, being this and Rondo. I want to play Symphony of the Night. That actually might be it. Super Castlevania 4, I think I'd like to give a try at some point.
I've heard it's markedly easier, yeah.
That's also what I have heard. And I don't know, I have a lot of problems with it, as I do with pretty much every game on the NES. But I think aesthetically, it's very strong at the very least. Its soundtrack is fantastic. And it created... I think I like the Castlevania lore more than I like Castlevania. If that makes sense.
I think that's fair. And for me, like, it's a game I can understand, like, started a very important franchise. I was telling my girlfriend, like, yeah, like, this game also created melodies that are iconic for gaming, just as a whole. So, like, it's a really important title, you know, as far as game design alone, game soundtrack. I mean, for, you know, 2 women doing the score, like, that's a big accomplishment, despite James Banana. But, like, no, they did an incredible job, especially in this era. So, kudos.
Yeah, and I hope her retirement is going well. One day, if we're able to talk to her, I think that would be super fun. But I do hope her retirement is going well. If she is truly retired and I'm not just only looking in the places that weren't updated and not this one, like, obscure website in the corner of the internet that actually tells me what she's really been up to since 2012. But yeah. So, in order to transition, we usually like to highlight a fan remix or cover from YouTube, OC Remix, what have you. I had to go for a remix of Wicked Child, of course, because, again, that song rules, and who better to go to for a game like Castlevania than Family Jewels. So please enjoy his cover of Wicked Child. We'll be right back.
All right, so we'll go from taking a whippica to Dracula there to doing some, like, kicks and guns and other weapons to angels. Yes, yeah, beating up angels of all things. Let's talk about Bayonetta. Bayonetta released for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in October 2009 in Japan. North America got the game on January 5th, 2010, which, boy, at the beginning of the year in January like that, that's an unusual release day for a game, especially these days. January 7th and 8th in Australia and Europe, respectively, in 2010. Now, Bayonetta has received multiple iterations as, the generation has progressed and whatnot. The game got a Wii U release in Japan on September 20th, 2014, and October 24th, 2014 in the rest of the world. This version had bonus Nintendo costume content, so Bayonetta could dress up as Link, as Samus, as Princess Peach, and do special attacks and abilities based on whatever costume you chose to wear, as an option, of course. And then the game got a worldwide release on PC on April 11th, 2017. A Nintendo Switch release was on February 16th, 2018, when Bayonetta and its sequel were combined in a release on Switch. And we're talking about it today because Bayonetta is getting a 4K 60 remaster bundled with the game Vanquish on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One today, February 18th, 2020, as of this episode's release. Bayonetta is developed by Platinum Games, published by Sega, though the Wii U and Switch versions of the games were published by Nintendo. What is Bayonetta? Bayonetta is a third-person 3D character action game, or like a hack and slash game. The combat is overall very similar to Devil May Cry, and we've talked about Devil May Cry 3 in a past episode, but using things like swords and guns and beating up enemies in a small arena area before moving on to the next spot. And this is really thanks to creator and director Hideki Kamiya. Hideki Kamiya created the original Devil May Cry. He's the director and creator of this game, of Bayonetta. And Bayonetta is the name of the character that you play as. And she is a witch who is capable of shape-shifting slightly, using various firearms. She possesses magical attacks as well. And she can use her hair to summon demons that dispatch her foes. So there are punches, kicks, short and long-ranged weapons, guns that she holds in her hands, as well as guns that are in her heels. There's also a slowdown witch time effect when you dodge at the perfect time, and then you can then deal massive counterattack damage on your enemies. And ultimately, there's a score at the end of each level, and you can use this to encourage replayability if you want to go for that top score, that platinum Bayonetta trophy on each level. So the story overall is that 500 years or so before the game's events, there are two factions that have preserved the balance of darkness and light throughout the world. These are the Umbra Witches and the Lumen Sages. Now, these two factions shared these two distinct treasures that are called the Eyes of the World, and they help generally oversee the passage of time. Now, it's been about 20 years since Bayonetta has woken up after a 500 years sleep with no memory of who she is, only to discover that she possesses one of the Eyes of the World. Now, she's in this fictional European city of Vigrid, and Bayonetta must battle through the Angels of Paradiso, as well as these 4 cardinal virtue figures, before discovering that the last Lumen Sage, named Balder, wants to use the Eyes of the World treasures to resurrect the all-powerful Jubileus, the Creator, who all of Bayonetta's enemies, these angels, have all spoken in reverence of. So what is the secret of Bayonetta's past? And can Bayonetta stop Balder and the return of Jubileus? That being said, Joe, what are our experiences with Bayonetta?
Zip, zilch, and nada. I've never played a Bayonetta game. I will when we get to it in Smash Pieces, because obviously this game specifically is our choice for Bayonetta, because what else are we going to pick? And I'm looking forward to it. All of my experience of Bayo, though, comes from her appearance in Smash. That's it.
And what a good appearance in Super Smash Brothers it was. I mean, say what you will about her dominance in the Wii U and 3DS metagame, but it was such a loyal representation, as all Sakurai inclusions in Super Smash Brothers are. I've played some of Bayonetta, probably like 2 to 3 hours or so, and I feel it was at a time when like I didn't appreciate character action games as much, so it's probably due for a return. I have the game through the Wii U collection of Bayonetta and Bayonetta 2, so like it's probably a good place to play it. Probably better on Switch, I would imagine, but you know, something like that 4K 60 remaster is tempting. But again, it's like, it's 2009. Like, there are some dated elements for a character action game at that time. You know, those kind of games have improved since then, but it's still a classic and an important game that brought an important protagonist to the forefront in games in a way.
And it also let Kamiya keep making character action games, which he didn't get to do before this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he's had quite the interesting history of games overall. I mean, Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, there's Beautiful Joe in there, there's Okami, there's Bayonetta, there's Wonderful 101, Scalebound got canceled, but Kamiya's had, definitely quite the history. Now, development on Bayonetta started in January 2007, so this was before, like, Platinum Games itself was actually formed. And this was part of the 4 initial games that Sega had a publishing partnership with Platinum Games. These games were Mad World, Infinite Space, Bayonetta, and Vanquish, so kind of makes sense that the last 2 are kind of tied together there. As we mentioned, Hideki Kamiya was the director of this game and really brought over a lot of his game experience, especially with character action games, as the director of the original Devil May Cry. We did, of course, mention Hideki Kamiya during our episode on Okami. Yeah, he is also the director of that game. So a lot of good, one-on-group combat action with Kamiya games. And his request overall for the character design of Bayonetta was a modern female witch that wears glasses and wields 4 guns. So he worked with artist Mari Shimazaki to come up with the design, and ultimately this included a beehive hairstyle for Bayonetta, which was certainly very distinct, but it also replaced the traditional pointy hat of a witch. Kamiya also really wanted to differentiate Bayonetta from other female characters, especially of the time, to, quote, give her a sense of mystery and intelligence. He has also said in plenty of interviews that, quote, in many ways, Bayonetta is my ideal woman.
See, again, taking it back to last week, just say that.
Uh-huh. Yep, absolutely. Don't hide behind breathing skin reasons. The theme of the game overall, just with its themes of character and its combat, it's sexiness with femininity. And it's definitely led to plenty of debates online of the sexiness of Bayonetta's character, and, if that's a good thing for the game industry or if it's just continuing the male gaze, the male lens of character. I mean, because Bayonetta's like ridiculously tall, like crazy long legs. Again, her hair is like, her clothes are made out of hair. And so when she's like summoning big demons, like, oh, she's losing her clothes to summon these demons to dispatch of her enemies. But it's the idea of like using her sexuality as her power and not like having it be any semblance of weakness in the world. So there's a lot of debate certainly there. And so like it's definitely a focal point of this game, I think.
Everything I know about Bayonetta is that it's the entire sexiness angle is her owning it specifically, and like it's hers.
Yes.
She's not doing it for anybody else. She's doing it for her.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't even like, maybe it's just because I haven't played the game. I doubt it. But from what I've always gathered, like Nah, she's like one of the good examples of how it can be used well.
Absolutely, for sure. There are inspirations throughout many different things that contribute to the overall vision of Bayonetta. Some of these include Scandinavian mythology, Devil May Cry 4, which was probably like the last character action game before this. Capcom, there's some familiarity with Kamiya. And the language, apparently, that's spoken by the angels and for all the infernal summons in the game is Enochian, which is like some old occult-like language. So that, pulling from different things here and there. Now, Platinum Games developed Bayonetta for the Xbox 360 specifically, while then Sega handled porting it to PlayStation 3. And this resulted in a markedly worse PlayStation 3 version, to the point where like reviews at the time were like, look, just don't buy this PS3 version. Like, there's no guarantee they'll patch it. And even then, like, it feels just blurry overall, like with textures and whatnot. The frame rate is all over the place. People said that watching the cutscenes felt like it was being watched through like a sepia filter. Not as good of an experience on PS3. I think loading times were also a concern. So if you have to play the original release, go with Xbox 360.
PS3 just couldn't catch a break in 2009.
I mean, no, not overall. But that was soon before their turning point. And I'm sure later releases have fixed all of these concerns. Also interesting to note that the original release of the game only featured an English voiceover cast. Helena Taylor played the lead role, and she does so very well. But other highlights include Grey Delisle as Jean, Dave Fennoy as Rodan, and Yuri Lowenthal as Luca. Now, Japanese voiceovers would be added for the Wii U version, but interesting that, for a worldwide release early on, it was only English voiceover, so very cool. Sega also tried to find real-life models to represent Bayonetta at places like trade shows. For example, at E3 2009, they selected Penny Drake to play Bayonetta in person after auditioning 100 women. Then they ran a contest through Maxim magazine. And the winner there, Andrea Bonaccorso, won an Xbox 360, a 50-inch plasma television, and a copy of the 360 version of the game. So it just shows what game promotions were like at the time, especially for a character like Bayonetta.
Also shows that even Sega knew that the PS3 version was not going to be great.
Pretty much. But the game was reviewed very well at its release, with a Metacritic of 90 for the Xbox 360 version and 87 for the PS3. Honestly, surprised it was that high on PS3, but the core fundamentals of the game are still very strong. And even future versions of the game were still reviewed in like the mid to high 80s. So a very strong game overall. It's praised at just being over the top and very stylish with this cool new protagonist, and the combat being, pitch perfect and top notch as far as character action games go. But the story is kind of messy and not told clearly overall. And yes, these technical hurdles on PlayStation 3 were also these points of criticism. The game sold 1.35 million copies as of March 31st, 2010, so a few months after launch throughout the world on the original versions. I can only imagine since then, you probably added like maybe a million or two more onto that with its other releases. Even like the Switch version too, I bet, like also kind of has included some boosts there. Oddly enough, I think because of its release timing, especially in the Western markets of very early on in January of 2010, I think Bayonetta kind of got overlooked for some of like the bigger game award shows at the time. Like we talked about the DICE Awards, the BAFTAs. But as far as different video game websites honoring the game here and there, IGN UK gave Bayonetta its Game of the Year for 2010. GameSpot gave it Best Boss Fights and Best Original IP. Game Trailers, Best New IP. And it was Giant Bomb's Best Debut Game. Just a standout title for character action, even though it got a weird release timing. So overall, the game's legacy, Bayonetta Bloody Fate was an anime film that was basically a retelling of the game's story that was released in 2013. Bayonetta is a playable character in the Super Smash Bros. Franchise, originally started as DLC in the Wii U and 3DS versions, and then, of course, continued to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Bayonetta received a sequel, Bayonetta 2, that was released in 2014 for Wii U. Sega did not want to publish the game, so it was on Nintendo to continue the legacy of Bayonetta. To many gamer chagrins. And so Nintendo's continued the publishing rights for another sequel, Bayonetta 3, currently in development for Nintendo Switch.
Allegedly.
So they say. There was a reveal trailer, and
then we haven't heard anything else in like 2 years. 3 years maybe even. I don't remember.
That was Game Awards 2017. So a little more than 2 years we saw that original trailer. So time's ticking. When it comes to the music for Bayonetta, we mentioned during our Okami episode where we talked about Masami Ueda, who a prominent composer for Clover Studios, for Platinum Games, and how on the Bayonetta project, he passed off lead composing duties to his protege, and that is Hiroshi Yamaguchi. So we're talking about Hiroshi Yamaguchi this week. Not much research on him, though. What I did find is that he was born on October 8th, 1979 in Yokohama, Japan. He started at Clover Studio on July 1st, 2004, when then he later moved on to Seeds Inc. on August 1st, 2006, finally ending up at Platinum Games starting on February 2nd, 2007. And that's where he still is, as far as I can tell. He is Masami Ueda's protege, and that's about it. A lot of people apparently named Hiroshi Yamaguchi, and when you start searching Hiroshi Yamaguchi composer, starts to make it difficult. There's apparently another, someone in the anime industry who's a screenplay writer named Hiroshi Yamaguchi, and he's older, and so it starts to get a little blurry on the research front. But Yamaguchi is lead composer on Bayonetta, or at least he's signified as such. He did contribute compositions to Bayonetta 2. He also worked on Okami, as we mentioned before. And he is also the lead composer on Platinum's The Wonderful 101, which is interesting because The Wonderful 101 has been brought back for hopes for having a remastered version on PS4 and Switch, it being a Wii U original exclusive game, through Kickstarter. And so, Yamaguchi's work lives on from there. I'm sure we'll have a future story within the next couple weeks saying the Kickstarter for Wonderful 101 has ended. Yamaguchi's work lives on, etc.
And made more money in the Kickstarter than it made released.
Yeah, kind of crazy. That's really crazy to think about. Yamaguchi also contributed compositions to Anarchy Reigns and Star Fox Zero. He contributed a Super Smash Bros. Ultimate arrangement as well for the map page / bonus level, which was a new arrangement in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, coming from Donkey Kong Country.
And that arrangement's amazing. See, this is the kind of thing I love learning about this show, is that was the Bayonetta composer. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Alrighty.
So there you go. When it comes to historical development research on the soundtrack, Ueda passed these responsibilities for main composition over to Yamaguchi. Of course, Ueda still did composition work for the game, but wanted to give Yamaguchi more of a push up in the industry. So aside from Hiroshi Yamaguchi and Masami Ueda, composers that are noted specifically on this product include Norihiko Hibino and Rei Kondo, who we've talked about on past episodes, for Yakuza 2 and also for Fire Emblem Awakening. But there are also notable inclusions from Takahiro Izutani, Takayasu Soreoka, Erina Niwa, Yoshitaka Suzuki, and Naoto Tanaka. So it's a big soundtrack. It's 5 discs as far as the official soundtrack release. So just a lot of music, a lot of composers contributing to the game. The goal for the soundtrack was to make music that was indicative of Bayonetta and that could only appear in Bayonetta. So by that logic, the team kind of went by 4 tent poles of who Bayonetta is. That 1, she is an unmatched beauty, a witch. 2, she is fast, agile, and has powerful attacks that spell instant death to monsters and heaven to guys. 3, she is cool and collected, sassy, and a real princess who just happens to like elements of torture.
Oh my god.
And 4, she is concerned with looking good. Glasses, heels, piercings, loves candy, and can show hints of being cute. So these were kind of the tentpoles of Bayonetta's character. And most people would think of a witch, that Bayonetta is. Witch would clearly mean dark, fantastical sounds, and this is not the case at all. Because since Bayonetta lives in the modern world, and she is an, quote, uninhibited modern conception of a woman, the music therefore must include a nice up-tempo beat, as well as expressing the idea of femininity, which, you know, for men to figure out what that means, I mean, kudos, good luck with that. But Yamaguchi said that he used beautiful instruments like pianos, electric pianos, organs, vibraphones, flutes, double bass, and a female chorus.
Okay, you can't say pianos and electric pianos. That second thing's just a piano.
Keyboard, man? Like, I don't know. But if you ask me, like, what is Bayonetta's soundtrack and what makes it stand out, if I had to explain to the common person, I think there are a lot of epic orchestral sounds and compositions in the score overall. After all, you're a witch taking on angels and like these twisted monster representations of heaven. Like there's going to be a grand sense of scale in all of that a epic orchestra can attain. But at the same time, when we're talking about what Bayonetta's character is, like it's a lot of jazzy, upbeat, energetic pieces. And so we'll kind of hear examples of both as we get to our 5 critical tracks. And we'll start with the first track, One of a Kind. One of a Kind is composed by Hiroshi Yamaguchi. This is apparently a recurring theme throughout the series, generally used in flashback cutscenes, as well as levels that take place in the past, that 500 years ago, during the witch hunts. Famously, this is the first song that you hear in the game. This is during the Records of Time narration, where Bayonetta and Jean are fighting angels on the continually falling Umbra Clock Tower, which is the stage that is representing Bayonetta in the Super Smash Bros. Series. So this song does appear in Super Smash Bros. Just this driving string, and then the choir comes in. It's such a cool piece, and it's like kind of giving you those tastes of what like this orchestra choir mix can sound like before you get to some of the bigger boss fights in the game. Really neat piece.
This is definitely a really like bombastic piece. It does have some Devil May Cry vibes to it, I feel like. Mm-hmm. It's the choir that does it. Like Devil May Cry 4 specifically, which makes sense when earlier you mentioned it was one of the inspirations for Bayonetta. Because Devil May Cry 4 also makes a lot of use of a choir. I think I agree the strings really make this one And also there's a bit where the piano sort of comes in too, and that's really cool as well.
Ooh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
this is a really cool song.
Great song. Great initial example, I think, had to be here on this Critical 5. A little more controversial if this one deserves to be here, though. Number 2 on the Critical 5. This is Mysterious Destiny. Look, it's a really important piece, okay? It's one of the main battle themes against the Angels of Paradiso. It's the theme of Bayonetta. It's Bayonetta's main theme. This is composed by Masami Ueda, vocals by Helena Noguera. Yamaguchi had an interesting quote on Helena Noguera, saying, quote, "Her mature feminine sense of glamour and a cute playfulness both coming through in her voice. She truly matched the vision we have of Bayonetta. I was able to meet her for recording, and Helena is as beautiful in person as her voice."
All right, dude, calm down.
We get it. You're working long hours composing this game for this sexy character. We get it. So a lot of people are very not happy overall that this is a battle theme in Bayonetta. I think it's nowhere near as good as Bayonetta's 2's main battle theme in the sequel. That theme being Tomorrow Is Mine. Like that song just kills this one for sure. And I think a lot of people think that Mysterious Destiny just gets really annoying and repetitive. But I don't think you can deny how important it is to this game. It's played a lot. The lyrics, they represent Bayonetta, and there's an instrumental version in Super Smash Brothers.
I could see why this song would get annoying, though. I would probably put it in the same category as Reach Out to the Truth, which I get really annoyed with very quickly.
Persona 4, yeah.
I don't know. I think it's a really, really good, I think it's a good song, but I could definitely see why, if I heard this multiple times in a game about fighting, I might get tired of it very quickly, but I don't know. We'll see when I play it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll have to see and get back to us. So just a little bit. Like it'll get in your head there.
I'll be there to give you an update in 4 years when we get to Bayonetta.
All right. The next song is another battle theme, but I think it's so much better. Just a big standout on the soundtrack. This is Fly Me to the Moon. The original music and lyrics for this piece are from Bart Howard in 1954. Vocals on this version by Helena Noguera. Now, Bart Howard's original song in 1954 was apparently titled In Other Words, which makes sense based on the lyrics, and it was introduced by Felicia Sanders in Cabarets. But then the title changed in later years as more and more performers picked up the song, including famously Frank Sinatra.
That's not the real reason you weebs know this song. It's because it's the credits theme of Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Absolutely.
So before I let you continue your spiel, I have a bad reputation with this song because it was one of the many songs on the soundtrack, or not the soundtrack, but like the playlist of a restaurant I used to work at. And so I heard this song so many damn times, not this version, obviously, but it's why I don't like listening to Sinatra music anymore. That restaurant ruined Sinatra for me. forever.
I feel like, yeah, if you hear that enough, that kind of makes sense. But this is another main battle theme in this game against the Angels of Paradiso. Whereas Bayonetta 2 has songs that kind of borrow elements of the song Moon River. This, Fly Me to the Moon is very important in the original Bayonetta. You hear this song in nearly every chapter where you're not taking on like a boss. And this is the Infinite Climax mix. There's a slower version of this song with vocals by Brenda Lee, and that exists in the second half of the credits. But interestingly enough, the official North American release of this soundtrack does not include any version of Fly Me to the Moon, probably because of some licensing issues. But it's a huge deal in the game, and for the official Japanese release of the score, it's got to be there.
I will give it this. This is probably the best version of the song I've ever heard. If you mentioned to me, I knew that Fly Me to the Moon was in this game. Did not know it was a battle theme until today. And if you would have told me that before I'd listened to it, I would have said, that sounds stupid. Why would that be a battle theme? This translates really weirdly well to being a fight theme.
It's incredible. I think it's my favorite song on the soundtrack, to be honest.
I think I agree, despite my problems with the original piece. I don't know.
Very, very interesting. But then we get back to the epic orchestral sound. And this is the Greatest Jubilee. Who else knows how to make an incredible final boss piece? He did so in Okami with The Sunrises. This is composed by Ray Kondo. And this is the final boss theme against Jubileus. Oh no, surprise. Jubileus actually does get reincarnated. You have to fight Jubileus as a final boss. And it's pretty regularly cited through different YouTubers and whatnot. Jubileus is one of just these most epic final bosses in games, as it's like a fight that just goes and goes and it goes there, like just really ratcheting up the scale of the fight. Now, this piece is about 7.5 minutes long. So if I do recommend listening to the whole thing, please do. Picking a sample was rather difficult. I think I actually like it when in the piece it becomes a little more triumphant, just like a more positive tones later in the song. But I think this is a part where it's more identifiable to more people, so this is why I chose the sample. But do listen to the full thing. It's an epic boss battle. It's an epic piece.
It's really long. It reminds me of Dancing Mad, kind of, a little bit. I feel like this is what Dancing Mad would sound like if made today. Something like this, at least.
Yes.
And also, was Ray Kondo responsible for Id Purpose, or was that somebody else?
He sure was, I think. Yep.
So that brings him to 3 very good final boss themes.
It's just his thing. So good. But then we kind of break the levity a little bit. Number 5 on the critical tracks. Let's dance, boys. This is composed by Hiroshi Yamaguchi. This is the credits theme of the game. Also plays during Bayonetta's famous dancing post-credits cutscene. It's just a silly jazzy piece. And it's great. It's even in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Super Smash Bros.
I'm pretty sure it's the song that I put on Umbra Tower as being the highest chance of playing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's just a really energetic piece that, it's like, this is one that's like, oh yeah, clearly this is definitively the first Bayonetta game. And so I feel like it had to be here, even though it's not as epic as these orchestral pieces or, jazzy with, these lyrics that borrow from classic songs. No, it's just fun.
Yeah, it's a really fun piece. I really like it.
So that does it for the Critical 5. Let's get to my tracks on the cutting room floor. A couple pieces here that I still really like, and I had a hard time deciding if they make the cut or whatever, but I feel pretty good about that Critical 5. But to start my cutting room floor, let's hit the climax. Another classic Bayonetta piece. This is composed by Masami Ueda, which it kind of makes sense because I feel like it borrows some elements a little bit from Mysterious Destiny, or at least some melodies there. And again, it makes sense in the sense that this is the song that essentially you're delivering the final blow to a boss. It plays most notably when Bayonetta is summoning an infernal demon at the end of a battle with an Auditio, or one of those 4 Cardinal Virtue bosses. So this is also used in Super Smash Bros., not only in the game, but is also used in Bayonetta's reveal trailer, like when she's summoning Gamora for her final smash, like this piece is playing. So it's an important one to Bayonetta overall, but just only used in these select moments. The other piece is Red and Black. This is composed by Hiroshi Yamaguchi. This is a really, really neat piece. I like the overall vibe of it. It plays during boss battles against Bayonetta's best friend and rival, Jean, particularly in chapters 5 and 12 of the game. I can't help but think of Rouge's music from Sonic Adventure 2 with the female choir and yeah.
See, just based on the beat alone, I'm getting Virgil.
I mean, the backing beat for sure. And it kind of makes sense. I feel like Jean is kind of a good parenthetical character in a way to a Virgil sort of like rival character. So I think that fits very nicely. It's a good point. This song also featured in Super Smash Bros. So I feel like if you're familiar with Bayonetta and Bayonetta's music from Smash, like you get a pretty good gist of what this game is. But just imagine like some more jazz, but a lot more orchestra. Like each of these 4 Cardinal Virtue bosses, Sapientia, and Temperentia, like they all have like their own battle themes that are just grand and epic and orchestral. And so what will I never forget about the game? It's something where like the soundtrack has always had much more impact on me, and like listening to it and just recognizing these songs really compared to the game itself. And I know the game is like a good example of like classic character action and a good example, especially at a certain point in like video game history, bringing forth a strong protagonist like Bayonetta. But I've always just loved the soundtrack so much more. And with the 4K remaster, felt like this would be a good time to bring it up here on the show.
I am really looking forward to playing this game again in like 4 years, because we got to hit the PS3 first. And we're pretty far from that.
But don't play the PS3 version.
I actually own the Wii U version of 2 that I was able to find the Wii U version pretty cheap, and it also came with the disc for 1. So nice. I own both of them on Wii U. That's probably how I'll play it, because I was thinking of buying the Switch version, and then the Wii U version was half the price. So I bought that.
Yeah, if it still runs, I mean, it seems to be a good version, and if your Wii U still runs, so.
Mm-hmm. So I'm excited for it, but I'm also very worried about playing this game, because I like character action games, but I am trash at them.
Well, you'll be happy to know that there are multiple difficulty levels, including one that was, I think, dubbed Mommy Mode, where they basically have you do automatic combos and like almost have it, play it for you. So
that's
don't
hilarious.
worry about the difficulty. If again, like Devil May Cry, if you really want to, you can crank up that difficulty, but don't worry for basic playing. So when you're talking about slaying monsters or angels, I don't know, whichever. I think for Castlevania and Bayonetta, great soundtracks this week. Very different sounds between the 8-bit and the orchestral and the jazz and all, but it gives you a really good range of what video game music has been and now continues to be to this day. So that'll do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe's over at The Debaga. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also at rhymeswithasia.com. But it's that MP3 podcast version that you want, hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. Get those MP3s on your podcast service of choice. From Apple Podcasts to Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts, you can take it with you on a run, in your car, at work, and we won't tell your boss that you're listening to conversations about great video game soundtracks.
I am no narc.
You can also get the MP3 podcast version on Spotify, but also on Spotify, we have a big playlist of all the songs that we have ever talked about on this show. If it's on Spotify, it's on that big Spotify playlist. Are we adding anything this week, Joe?
So Bayonetta is on Spotify. Castlevania is not, though. I did want to bring up that since the last time we recorded, I discovered that Konami did in fact dump a bunch of Castlevania soundtracks on there, including Symphony of the Night, but nothing before Rondo of Blood as far as I can tell. So none of the NES ones are on there, so unfortunate. But also a bunch of like vocal Metal Gear Solid songs, so I went ahead and added Can't Say Goodbye to Yesterday from Metal Gear Solid 2 to the Spotify playlist. And yeah, Bayonetta will be added this week. Probably not Fly Me to the Moon. I imagine that's probably not on Spotify. But who knows? Maybe I'll be surprised. Also, Laura Shikihara recently revealed that a bunch of her stuff got put on Spotify, including Everything's All Right from To the Moon. So that has been thrown on the Spotify playlist as well.
Always great to hear her music. Always great that Sega likes to put their music out there. So thank you to everyone. Get more video game music on Spotify. Absolutely. And we're going to keep churning out those bonus tracks when we can. I mean, maybe Best of 2018 coming in the next month or so. That'd be really cool. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I will be talking about Kenji Yamamoto.
I will be talking about Setsuo Yamamoto. That should be a first and maybe a theme between the two games. But to play us out, we'll talk about a fan remix or a fan cover of something from this game's soundtrack. For Bayonetta, I feel like it kind of has to be Mysterious Destiny. Different people, like, hey, if you don't like the original version of that song, I'll take my own crack at it. And Elsie Lovelock on YouTube, she's a great vocalist there. She had her own stab at the theme of Bayonetta, that battle track, Mysterious Destiny. Really great job. I enjoy it. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Sound Chat. We'll see you next time. Take care.